The ever-optimistic robot Jojo finds himself depressed after getting stood up by Gilda, but he receives a frantic phone call from the damsel in distress, which may change everything. We're going to talk about it in our review of Love Me, a Romance Story number 2 from Mad Cave Studios. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Love Me, a Romance Story number 2. Before we dive in, let's take less than 60 seconds to recap what happened in the first issue. We're introduced to Jojo, who is the world's most optimistic robot cabbie. He was shocked to hit it off with a pretty girl named Gilda, who was a customer in one of his routes. And they hit it off. They decide to go on a date, and he feels like this is the one last thing in my life that would make my life perfect. If I can find the love of my life, find somebody who cares for me as much as I care for her, everything would be perfect in heaven. Unfortunately, it doesn't end so well when he shows up for the date and she stands him up, which kind of sends him into a spiral of depression. That brings us to issue number 2. We catch up with Jojo, and he's sort of despondent and depressed, and nothing's going right for him. His cat is underfed, his plants are not watered properly, and all you hear coming out of his apartment is the sound of a vacuum cleaner. No music, no life, no joy, no nothing. He is despondent. Then a few weeks later, Jojo receives a phone call out of the blue, and it's Gilda. And all of a sudden he perks up. He says, "What's going on?" She says, "Please come to Alfio's. I'm in trouble and I need your help." He doesn't know who or what Alfio is, so as soon as the call is hung up and he hears noises in the background that sound like a struggle or maybe even screams, he says, "I got to find this Alfio's, and I don't know what it is. Let me call my buddy who's also a cabbie, a gentleman by the name of Wizard." And then Wizard goes into a very lengthy explanation after he gets the lowdown from Jojo about how Jojo should not be involved in this situation. Turns out that Alfio's is a restaurant. It also happens to be a front for the Petty mafia family. And it's run by Boss Alfonso, who is a scarred up individual who's a really tough customer, not anybody you want to mess with. And his son is named Carmelo, and Carmelo is also a killer and a brute and also somebody you don't want to mess with. Gilda, it so happens, is the mafia family's lawyer. And for the longest time, Carmelo has been in love with Gilda, although she is absolutely not interested. So now we have this dynamic of mafia and mafia lawyer and unrequited love that's turning into a big old mess. And so Jojo has no choice but to get involved, even though he doesn't want to get involved. But Wizard says, "Stay away, don't get involved with any of this." But what's a robot in love going to do? So Jojo goes to Alfio's, the restaurant, and says, "Where's Gilda?" And he's there with Carmelo and his mafioso henchmen. And they say, "No robots allowed. We don't want your kind in here. Where Gilda is none of your business. Get out of here." So Jojo, being the nice, super friendly, super optimistic robot, does what he's going to do. He rolls up his sleeves, metaphorically speaking, cracks his knuckles, metaphorically speaking, and he cleans house. And that's it. It's a super fast, super quick read. So let's move over to the character development. And what does this mean for Jojo? Just because he's a robot cabbie who's happy-go-lucky and endlessly optimistic, that doesn't mean he doesn't know how to beat down a thug or two. In this case, more than that, probably more like 12. Despite the oddity of her circumstances, being a robot cabbie and also being a super friendly, optimistic guy who has a cat and plants and just wants to have a nice, sunny, happy life, he takes out the trash when he needs to. And he was already immediately likable from the first issue. In this issue, he snaps himself out of a depression when Gilda needs help. And when he takes out that trash, his likability goes up tenfold. I don't know what magic sauce the creators are sprinkling on this issue, but you'd never expect a robot cabbie to be just somebody that you would absolutely 100% behind, and that is what you get here with Jojo. Let's move over to the art and Stefano Cartacelli's very stylized visual presentation. It's it's hard to describe. It's sort of a mix between what we think is a mix between Frank Miller and Berkeley Breathe. You know, if you're familiar with some of the comic strips there, it doesn't, it's not, maybe not everybody's cup of tea, fully get it, but we're always about the art style. It doesn't have to be the cleanest art style. It doesn't have to be the most perfect or, super tight, super lean art style. And as long as it can do two things, it has to convey part of the story through the visuals, which it does here, and it has to convey the emotion of the characters, which it absolutely does here. So even though from a technical cleanliness point of view, may not be what you would see at a big two necessarily, but Cardocelli is just absolutely nailing the mastery in conveying visual storytelling without words and the emotions of the characters, and it comes across loud and clear. Let's switch over to pacing and structure. It's a 32-page comic, but it is super fast read. It breaks down into effectively about 3 scenes. You have the prologue, where you see that Jojo is sort of despondent and not really knowing what to do with his life after he got stood up by Gilda. And you receive a phone call and is getting the whole exposition background information from Wizard. And then you see Jojo heading to the restaurant and doing what he needs to do to find Gilda. So it's only really 3 scenes, I should say. And they move super quick, but they move so smoothly and so well. And each panel is incredibly efficient at giving you exactly the information you need, conveying atmosphere, conveying mood, conveying emotion, conveying tone, and then just goes one right after the other, right after the other. And all of it is meant to build up Jojo, to set him on a path, give him direction and purpose. And this is an incredibly efficient comic. So for a 32-pager to read this fast and still feel so satisfying is almost amazing. So let's talk about the themes of this comic and what's the underlying source of the story. It's about hope. In the first issue, Jojo had hope that he might find the love of his life, and to a certain degree that seems to be playing out. Then he loses hope when Gilda stands him up, and now he's sort of in this valley of depression, if you will. And then once he gets a phone call from Gilda and recognizes she's in trouble and maybe the being stood up wasn't her fault, then his hope is rekindled and flares up as he goes to rescue her, who might be the love of his life. It's all about hope, getting it, earning it, getting it taken away, having it returned, holding on to it tighter, and all the things that go along with it. It's really just a roller coaster of hope, if that makes sense. Final thoughts. What do we think about Love Me, a Romance Story number 2 from Mad Cave Studios? It's a super quick read, but it is a powerhouse of giving you action, heart, energy, direction, purpose, momentum. Perillo's script is a masterclass on delivering efficient engagement, which is grabbing the attention of the reader and not letting go. And Cardocelli's artwork, granted, might not be everybody's cup of tea. It's very stylized and sort of in a strange comic strippy sort of way, but it gives you a protagonist who's just every movement and every expression and every gesture is just somebody that you want to like and you want to root for, which is a perfect fit for this type of story. Therefore, we're going to give Love Me, a Romance Story number 2 from Mad Cave Studios, a 9 out of 10. Do not sleep on this comic. I implore you. This is a surprising kind of a sci-fi romance type of twist. It's unlike anything that you can see on the shelves right now. Please do not sleep on this comic. And if you do pick it up, tell us what you think about it. We want to know if we're just smoking dope or if there's or do you feel the same way that we do? Leave a comment down below. Otherwise, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned through the outro for our next review. Thank you very much.